The elevator doors hadn't even fully closed when I heard the CTO's cackling voice echo off the brushed steel walls. Fire her department for that Lambo the second they finish the new code, he snorted. I froze. My badge hadn't scanned fast enough. I was standing just outside the elevator in the shadows of the 15th floor, holding a cold coffee and a USB stick with the latest nightly build. And there they were, him and the CEO's son, golden boys of the executive frat house, leaning back like they were auditioning for a villain role in a mid-budget Netflix series. The CEO's son let out this obnoxious chuckle. Yeah, once we launch, Brenda and her merry band of code trolls are toast. Daddy wants higher margins. Then he added mockingly, don't worry, we'll send her a fruit basket, or maybe a doorstop made from her old server rack. I didn't move, not at first. It was one of those moments that stretches time out like warm gum, sticky, slow, surreal. I just stood there, barely breathing, while the fluorescent hum of hallway lights buzzed like a warning. My heart wasn't racing, it was sharpening, like a blade dragged over stone. When the elevator dinged closed, I finally stepped back into motion. I walked calmly to my desk, empty except for a sad desk cactus and a Red Bull graveyard. Sat down, plugged in the USB, opened the folder I hadn't touched in almost 2 years, Skyworks Modular V1. You ever feel your blood turn cold and clean at the same time? That was me, not rage, not sadness. Just clarity, the kind that slices through self-delusion like a razor through printer paper. You build something from the ground up, line by line, commit by commit. You sacrifice weekends, birthdays, date nights, even your own damn health, and in return, they trade you for a luxury car and a quote-unquote efficiency strategy. By the way, if you're listening to this and think, damn, that's wild, do me a tiny favor. Tap the subscribe button, give it a like. Seriously, 90% of folks just lurk here like digital ghosts in the machine. But your support? That's what keeps stories like this coming. All right, back to the betrayal buffet. Skyworks Modular wasn't just some old sandbox project. It was a legally registered consulting firm I'd set up after grad school. LLC, still active, still mine. Back then I thought maybe I'd freelance. Life got busy and I shelved the idea, but the shell stayed alive. And when the company started the platform rebuild 18 months ago, I proposed a new architecture. Clean, efficient, scalable, and modular. My firm's framework. It wasn't malicious, not at first. I documented everything. I logged the use of integration layers, even submitted optional contracts through internal review. No one cared. Legal skimmed, waved it through. Consulting integration doesn't apply, they said. It's internal. I nodded, archived their emails, and kept building. Because I believed in the mission. I believed they believed in us. Turns out they believed in quarterly margins and car leases. So that night, I started tracing the usage logs, quietly rerouting all commits and versioning through the consulting node I'd spun up months ago. Again, not a violation. Not yet. Everything was transparent. Everything was traceable. All it would take to trigger the clause was intent malice. Like, say, planning to fire the team while benefiting from the active infrastructure we built. Which, lucky for me, they just said, out loud, in a damn elevator. I spent the next few hours in silence, rechecking timestamps, drafting the license activation notice, scheduling access log tracking to go live, building the digital tripwire that would make the whole damn thing undeniable. No one noticed. They never do. When you're the woman who just keeps things working, you become part of the furniture. Which is perfect, because furniture doesn't raise suspicions when it moves at midnight. By 3:17 a.m., I had every breadcrumb in place. I stared at the blinking cursor of an email draft to the company's legal inbox. I didn't send it, not yet. Not until they flipped the switch and launched the system. That would be the trigger. That would be the moment they stopped testing my work and started using my licensed infrastructure. I leaned back, cracked my knuckles, and stared out at the empty office floor. Rows of ghost-lit monitors, abandoned coffee mugs, team photos pinned to cubicle walls like gravestones. I thought of my devs, Jess, who stayed late to fix memory leaks, Aaron, who brought donuts on Sundays during crunch time, Leo, who once slept in the server room after a 36-hour deployment. They weren't just headcount, they were builders, believers, now apparently just speed bumps on the road to a sports car. I didn't cry. I didn't vent. I just logged off and walked into the storm they didn't even know was coming. Rebuilding the platform was supposed to be my magnum opus. 18 months of my life poured into a system designed to be leaner, faster, smarter than anything we'd built before. When they handed me the specs, the old backend was like a swamp, slow, bloated, buggy, duct taped together with half-abandoned libraries and temporary patches that had somehow been running for 4 fiscal years. They gave me 5 engineers, 2 interns, and 1 promise. Do it right this time. So I did, but not for them. I started by splitting the entire architecture into modules, real modules. Each function isolated, interchangeable, testable in isolation, swappable with 1 line of config. Every critical service wrapped in abstraction, piped through a shared orchestration layer I labeled C layer in the internal docs. That was short for consulting layer, but no one asked. No one ever asks. They just want their graphs green and their funding rounds greener. My devs followed my lead like pros. They didn't know the deeper game, they just thought I was a control freak about clean interfaces and compartmentalization. Jess even joked once, "You architect like you're preparing for a hostile takeover." I laughed and said, "Or a clean divorce." Deep inside the documentation, buried under a boring YAML schema, and 5 paragraphs of legal-sounding filler, is one quiet line: C-layer assets managed via third-party consulting node. See Skyworks modular licensing for access control protocols. It had been there since day one, tucked away, version, timestamped. No tricks, no secrets, but they didn't read, or if they did, they didn't care. Internal only, legal said when I submitted the integration proposal in the first month. We're not externalizing any of this, so none of the usage clauses apply. I had that email too, saved as a PDF, signed by one of their VPs. Idiots. Skyworks modular licensing. I opened the file again that morning, eyes scanning the language I'd written years ago. My little LLC was still active. I paid the filing fee every year like clockwork. Never really used it, just a backup plan in case I ever got tired of being someone's full-time fix-it fairy. Clause 5.2 jumped out like a knife in the drawer. All asset usage, digital access, or derivative work executed via Skyworks consulting architecture is subject to active usage fees unless explicitly waived by written release. There it was, the tripwire. The moment they used what they didn't own, it flipped from internal testing to unauthorized active deployment. And the fee schedule, $50,000 an hour per developer seat, retroactive to first use. Legally binding, not buried, just ignored. You'd think I'd feel triumphant reading that again. But honestly, I felt numb, detached. Not angry, anger is hot, sloppy, distracting. This was cold, purposeful, like cleaning the barrel of a gun before putting it away for good. I started tracing the commits, backtracking the system logs to the first time the production branch hit the consulting node. It was all so clean. Dev IDs mapped to Slack tags, time logs, code diffs. Every change they made through my infrastructure. Not out of malice, but because I built the damn thing to be intuitive. And now it was all evidence, breadcrumbs, every one of them leading to a truth they couldn't walk back. The foundation of their new empire wasn't theirs. They'd built a mansion on land I still owned and didn't even bother to check the deed. That day, I quietly updated the Skyworks site, added a new page titled Active Clients. Password protected, of course, not that they'd look. I created the invoice schedule, templated the notices, prepared the delivery protocols. If they'd just honored our work, none of it would have mattered. But they'd turned loyalty into leverage, trust into transaction. They assumed I was the quiet one, the grateful one, the thank you for this opportunity girl. They forgot I was the architect, and the architecture remembers everything. 2 weeks before the investor demo, everything went from agile to emergency fire drill. Suddenly, the leadership team decided we were ahead of schedule. Never mind that half the integration suite was still flagged yellow in QA. The CTO, drunk on the smell of his own spin, started every meeting with some variant of "we're making history here, people," like he was Steve Jobs in a Men's Warehouse jacket. He wanted the system live by the following Friday. Due diligence is basically done, he told us, waving around a printout of a Slack thread like it was a contract. Lawyers say we're good to go. Of course, I hadn't spoken to legal, not once. My team had been cut out of every call that didn't involve debugging or performance tuning. We were the engine, not the driver, and they were about to floor it. That same afternoon, I walked into the break room and caught the CEO's son in mid-peacock. He had his girlfriend cornered by the LaCroix fridge, talking loud enough to make sure everyone heard. "Once the code's live, we're cleaning house," he said, grinning like he'd just solved poverty. "Firing half the tech team boosts margins by 11%. Investors love it." She giggled. "Won't that like break everything?" He popped a can open and said, "Babe, the system runs itself now." That's the point. Brenda built it modular. It's like Legos for adults. Anyone can use it. Anyone, huh? I walked past them without a word, eyes straight ahead. My badge beeped against the glass door of the dev floor and I stepped inside the server room. The hum of the racks was almost soothing, honest at least. Machines didn't lie to your face while cashing in on your work. They either ran or they didn't. I sat down and opened the commit queue. Everything they wanted finalized was already built. We were just optimizing now, patching memory leaks, stabilizing APIs, tightening performance. They thought we were polishing their trophy, but every one of those commits, I routed them through the consulting node, deliberately, publicly, documented, transparent. The C layer was no longer optional, it was the core. When Jess asked about the rerouting, I smiled and said, "Standardizing, so it scales clean." She nodded. No one questioned it. Why would they? The system ran like silk, and they were too tired, too underpaid, and too overpromised to look for strings. At the all hands that week, the CTO pulled up a chart with a hockey stick growth curve, puffed out his chest, and said, "This is what brilliance looks like, folks." The room clapped, some out of fear, most out of habit. I clapped too, smiled just enough. Then went back to my desk and finalized the access logs, each developer ID, each time block, each service route, tagged, logged, archived. They were locking themselves in. I didn't even know it. See, modular systems aren't just flexible, they're traceable. Every container spin-up left a footprint. Every call through the C layer had a signature, and every signature linked back to the Skyworks license. No secrecy, no sabotage, just structure. The same structure they'd approved, ignored, and now depended on. By Thursday, the platform was stable. Load tests passed. QA signed off. I uploaded the final build through Skyworks, of course, and scheduled the demo environment deployment for 11:59 p.m. Friday, that's when it would become live use. That's when the clause kicked in. The second that clock hit midnight, they'd be actively using my infrastructure for profit. And that's when the licensing would apply. Not in theory, not metaphorically, but in real, billable, legally binding time. They thought I was just playing nice, that I was the good little tech lead, smiling through long hours and last-minute asks. They saw my silence as weakness. They mistook my calm for compliance. What they didn't realize, what they never bothered to consider, was that my calm came from certainty. Because while they were busy high-fiving over investor decks, I was preparing a digital reckoning. And every fake smile I gave them, that was just me counting down. Friday felt like a funeral in reverse. Everyone was smiling, but the air was heavy. We pushed the last hotfix at 3:14 a.m. that morning, after Leo discovered a weird caching bug in the analytics module. We squashed it, rebooted, revalidated, and by sunrise, the thing was running smoother than a Vegas card dealer on Adderall. QA signed off with one word in the Slack channel: clean. The CTO strutted into the open floor plan around 10 a.m., wearing his launch day polo shirt, tight enough to make his CrossFit trainer proud, tucked in like he thought it made him look presidential. He slapped his palms together like a high school coach before a pep rally and shouted, "Launch is greenlit, people. Let's make history." Applause, whoops. Champagne bottles rolled in around noon, courtesy of the CEO's son, who waltzed through the dev floor handing out plastic flutes like he was blessing the peasants with holy water. I took one, toasted with the team, and sipped just enough to make it look real. No one noticed I wasn't celebrating. I was watching the clock. All day long, they paraded investors and potential partners through the office like it was a damn zoo exhibit. "Here's where the magic happens," the CEO's son said, pointing at our cluster of desks like he'd built any of it. Fully modular backend. Our own proprietary architecture. Clean as a whistle. Proprietary, huh? Cute. I kept my face neutral, smiled politely, answered questions when I had to. CTO introduced me once as the dev lead who made this whole engine run like a dream. Then added, "But the vision? That was all strategy." Strategy, sure. By 7 p.m., most of the floor had cleared out. A few engineers stayed behind to keep an eye on things, but everyone else funneled to the rooftop for launch drinks. Jess texted me, "You coming up?" I wrote back, "Soon." But I didn't go. Instead, I sat alone in the darkened server room, hum of the racks rising around me like a hymn. My hands moved without hesitation. I opened the Skyworks control panel, selected the production branch, verified the hashes on the final build, attached the compliance log, scheduled the deployment. Time, 11:59 p.m. Deployment node, Skyworks Modular V1, status, go. I hovered for breath, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to feel it. 18 months, hundreds of thousands of lines of code, countless weekends, and a single overheard elevator conversation that turned it all into a loaded weapon. I clicked confirm. Deployment began. The system was live, but not for them. At 12:01 a.m., an email left my encrypted-out box addressed to the company's legal inbox with CCs to the Compliance Archive, General Counsel, and Internal Audit. Subject line, Notice of Active Usage Terms, Skyworks Modular Licensing. The body was short, professional, clinical. As of 11:59 p.m., system deployment through Skyworks Modular Infrastructure constitutes active use under License Agreement ID #SX7781. Please find attached the current fee structure, developer ID access logs, and clause summaries per section 5.2 of our consulting terms. Feel free to contact the listed legal representative for any clarification. It looked like a formality, a footnote, maybe even a misdirected email, but it wasn't. It was a trigger. Legally, the moment that build went live, pushed from my license node, the licensing clock started ticking. $50,000 per developer seat, per hour. Retroactive from the moment they began active use. Most of them were upstairs drinking overpriced whiskey, bragging about the future. I sat there in the quiet, sipping the last of my now flat Red Bull and watched the logs populate with each microservice lighting up. Every ping, every ping, every ping, they were inside the house now. They just didn't know I owned the keys. To them, nothing had changed. The dashboard still glowed. The system still hummed. Everything looked stable, polished, final. But behind the curtain, their empire had shifted 2 inches to the left, and the ground they were standing on wasn't theirs anymore. I closed the laptop. Took one last look at the usage stream, and for the first time in months, I breathed. The morning after launch day should have been triumphant. Balloons, bagels, somebody doing a sloppy dance with a folding chair because the investors were blown away by the metrics. Instead, it was quiet. Not peaceful quiet, suspicious quiet, the kind of hush that creeps in before a thunderstorm and makes the birds disappear. I didn't show up. Not in person, not in Slack, not even a passive-aggressive thumbs-up emoji under one of the CTO's all-caps launch success messages. Nothing, ghost mode. And that apparently was my first crime of the day. The CTO noticed by 9:06. He stormed over to my desk, empty, still warm from my usual ass-in-seat punctuality, and muttered loud enough for the whole floor to hear. She's sulking. Can't handle being left out of the spotlight. Left out, sir, I built the spotlight. And now I was watching it roast you from the outside. By 9:20, the team had picked up on the weird energy. Jess pinged me, hey, everything okay? Kinda tense in here. I didn't respond. Aaron followed with CTO pacing like a Roomba with anger issues. Again, nothing from me. But elsewhere on the 17th floor, in the legal wing where everyone wears fleece vests and reads term sheets like bedtime stories, something had arrived. My email, the licensing notice. It sat in the shared legal inbox like a grenade with a polite subject line. Notice of active usage terms, Skyworks modular licensing. At first, nobody took it seriously. Probably just another third-party vendor update, someone assumed. But by 8:17 a.m., one of the compliance analysts had flagged it in Slack. Does this refer to our backend? That's when the junior paralegal got looped in. Fresh out of law school, still using the default Outlook signature, nervous enough to sweat through a navy blazer. He opened the attachments. Read the invoice terms. Paused at the number, $50,000/hour/developer. By 8:42, he was dialing the contact number listed. It rang twice and forwarded straight to my attorney's office. Thank you for calling the law offices of Mason and Trill. You've reached counsel for Skyworks Modular. If this is regarding active software usage, please refer to Clause 5.2 of the attached notice or remain on the line for direct support. He stayed on the line. Poor kid. You could almost hear his soul trying to claw out of his mouth. At 8:49 a.m., very different kind of Slack message went out. This one from legal to the CTO, the CEO, and 3 unnamed C-suite execs. Short, tense, urgent, possible licensing issue with backend. Needs immediate review. Re Brenda Watkins/Skyworks Modular. No one responded because the demo was in 18 minutes. They couldn't cancel, couldn't delay. The investors were already in the building, laughing too loud in the lobby, double-fisting lattes, wearing those fake friendly smiles that mean we might buy you, or we might gut you and wear your code like a hat. Upstairs in the boardroom, someone finally opened the compliance folder attached to my email. PDF, 7 pages. Labeled access logs, dev IDs, timestamp commits, plain English. No drama, just numbers, and every number a receipt. The CTO squinted at the file like it had personally insulted him. This can't be real, he muttered. The CEO's son leaned over his shoulder. Wait, did she really license our backend? From down the table, someone asked, where is Brenda? Meanwhile, I was 3 blocks away. Corner cafe, low music, decent espresso, and the corner table with the good light. I had my phone on Do Not Disturb, my inbox open, one eye on the logs still pinging from the system they thought they owned. The espresso was strong. The kwasa was still warm. And as I stirred my coffee, I watched the panic begin to bloom, first in texts, then in missed calls, then finally in a desperate, breathless voicemail from the CTO, Brenda, hey, we got some weird email from you. Can you give me a call, like right now? I sipped my coffee and smiled. By 9:57 a.m., the boardroom was standing room only. Rows of navy suits and polished loafers shuffled into place like they were auditioning for a finance-themed Broadway revival. Investors from New York, Singapore, 2 from some VC with a logo that looked like a sideways avocado. The air smelled like artisanal cologne, stale kwasas, and fear trying to wear confidence as deodorant. The CEO stood at the head of the long obsidian table, grinning like a televangelist about to pass the collection plate. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, voice smooth as bourbon, what we're about to show you is not just a product, it's a revolution. Applause. Forced, synchronized, practiced. The CTO clicked his clicker and the first slide popped up. System live since midnight, 99.997% uptime. Stable, he said, chest puffed out like a pigeon on parade. Clean, fast, fully modular. He glanced at the CEO's son, who nodded like his neck was on a hinge. Built to scale with minimal overhead. The graphs came next. CPU loads, throughput metrics. API latency curves so flat they practically licked the x-axis. The investors nodded. One of them even took a photo of the screen with his phone like it was the Mona Lisa of backend performance. And me, I wasn't there. My name, never mentioned, not once. They called the new system Athena. Cute, sounded smart, mythological, marketable, like it had risen fully formed from the CTO's temple in a cloud of divine wisdom and Docker containers. Meanwhile, on the hall in a smaller conference room, no fancy screens, no catered pastries, legal was unraveling. 3 lawyers, 2 analysts, 1 junior associate who looked like he might pass out into his MacBook. They were poring over Clause 5.2 like it was the Rosetta Stone. Reading it, rereading it, highlighting in 3 colors. All usage of Skyworks modular architecture, including derivative service execution, orchestration pipelines, or data abstraction through licensed nodes, constitutes active use upon deployment unless otherwise exempted in writing by the provider. The junior analyst muttered, so, if she deployed through her node, one of the lawyers finished for him. They've been actively using her infrastructure since 11:59 last night. Silence. Without a waiver, more silence. And the fee schedule is retroactive. $50,000 per developer, per hour. A pause, since midnight. That's when the CTO's phone started vibrating on the boardroom table. He ignored it. It buzzed again and again. The screen lit up with a message preview, need you in legal, urgent. Brenda's licensing terms are valid, Phil. But the CTO was mid-sentence, waving at a cost-efficiency slide. Once we phase out some of the legacy team, he said, voice dripping with false modesty, our operating margin increases by nearly 12%. That's without cutting corners. That's just optimization. The CEO's son added, grinning, we've already identified redundancies. Streamlining's in progress. One of the investors asked how many engineers maintain Athena. The CTO smirked. Less than a dozen, and soon fewer. Another vibration on the phone. New message, clause 5.2 is enforceable. Her logs are time-stamped. System is legally not proprietary. The CTO glanced at the screen this time, just briefly, just enough for crack to show. He stumbled over his next line. Our legal position is solid. Back in the cafe, I watched the pings roll in. Each action they took, every time a dev logged in, every metric refresh, every dashboard load was logged, signed, verified. My infrastructure was humming beneath their champagne toast. They didn't know it, but every success they were celebrating was being piped through a license they never activated. At 10:14, I refreshed the Skyworks dashboard. Active connections, 42. Total hours, climbing. Estimated billing, $2.1 million and rising. The CEO raised his glass for toast. To the future, they all clinked. And somewhere down the hall, someone in legal muttered, oh God, they've been demoing her system this whole time. At exactly 10:58 a.m., just as the CEO was leaning into his closer, that slick, practiced monologue about unlimited scale and long-term market dominance, the boardroom door creaked open. Not slammed, not flung, just creaked. Quiet, polite like a knife slipping out of a drawer, a man stepped in. Pinstripe suit, leather briefcase, wire-rimmed glasses that caught the light just enough to obscure his eyes. Not one of theirs, not from legal, not from any of the VCs. He didn't say a word at first. Just walked, unbothered, unwelcome, unhurried, down the side of the long obsidian table. The CTO sat back in his chair. Can we help you? The man stopped behind the CEO and gently placed the briefcase on the table like it was full of diamonds or dynamite. He popped the latches, opened it, and slid a manila folder forward. Then he spoke. Calm, crisp. My name is Charles D. Trill, Counsel for Skyworks Modular Licensing. This is a formal delivery of usage fee notification under Active Licensing Agreement SX 7781, per Clause 5.2. Every conversation in the room collapsed into silence. The CEO blinked. I'm sorry, what is this? Mr. Trill flipped the folder open, turned it toward him, and tapped a single line on the first page with a smooth, manicured finger. This document confirms that your production deployment is executing within licensed architecture, owned and maintained by Skyworks Modular, effective from 11:59 p.m. last night. He turned the page. Your system logs show active usage by 42 developer credentials across 9 service branches. Under the current licensing structure, the agreed fee for non-exempt usage is $50,000 per developer seat, per hour. Someone coughed, or maybe choked, hard to tell. The CTO's voice cracked like a dry twig. That's not right. That architecture belongs to us. We built it in-house. The lawyer raised an eyebrow. Did you sign an exemption waiver? The CTO looked like a child who just peed himself in front of the class. No, I mean there was no need. Then the default terms apply. Trill interrupted, flat as steel. The developer of record is Miss Brenda Watkins. Underlying modular architecture, orchestration pipeline, and routing infrastructure are all documented as built and deployed through the Skyworks node. Your usage was recorded. Your access logs confirm compliance with activation triggers. There was no waiver. There is no release. He turned another page. Current owed total as of this moment, $2.6 million, and climbing. The CEO looked like he'd been slapped with a frozen salmon. This is absurd. He snapped, this is our system. It's not, the lawyer said, not even blinking. It runs on infrastructure you don't own, through contracts you never reviewed, with services deployed from an external consulting license. The CEO tried to laugh, We're in the middle of pitch. This is obviously a mistake. But one of the investors, silver hair, expensive watch, no patience for theater, was already pulling out his phone. I'm calling compliance, he said to no one in particular. We're not closing a deal with a company that doesn't own its own product. The CTO tried to speak, tried to pivot. This is just paperwork. We can sort this out. The code runs, the system is stable. Mr. Trill offered a thin, professional smile. Yes, stable and leased. Another investor leaned forward, squinting at the invoice summary in the folder. Wait, is this real-time billing? Yes, and we're already yes. A third investor stood up. Excuse me, he muttered. Slipping out of the room, his phone was already pressed to his ear. Yeah, I need to check something. No, now we've got a problem. The CEO's son finally spoke. You mean to tell me Brenda did this? Mr. Trill just closed the folder and said she followed the terms? You didn't? No yelling, no threats, just a folder, a number, and a quiet unraveling that even the slickest smile couldn't tape back together. Back at the cafe, I refreshed the dashboard. $3.1 million. I stirred my coffee, bit into a muffin, and waited for the fire to spread. The folder didn't just contain billing, it was a forensic map of their arrogance. Inside were screenshots, server logs, access credentials, licensing keys, all cross-referenced, dated, and organized with brutal precision. Every push they made, every service they spun up, every API call routed through the consulting layer. All of it ran through Skyworks Modular, all of it timestamped, and all of it every line on the record. Legal had cracked the folder open in a side room first, huddled around a laptop like it was a radioactive core. The junior analyst who'd flagged my email was now white in the face, highlighting sections with a trembling hand. Slack confirmations between devs. Hey Jess, rerouting this branch through C-Layer. Brenda said it'll scale better. Cool, as long as the new pipeline plays nice with the test suite. Service logs from Jenkins, Git, Kubernetes, backed up to an immutable audit log I'd quietly attached to Skyworks license node months ago. Not hidden, not even encrypted beyond standard protocol. They just never looked, never thought to. The CTO stormed in, yanked the laptop away from the analyst, and scrolled furiously. Page after page of receipts. His own Slack comments, his approvals, his bragging about how the modular setup was genius. All there. All his? Wait, this backend, one board member said slowly, voice tightening with each word, isn't even on our infrastructure? The room paused like someone had hit mute on a war movie. The CTO blinked, his lips parted. No sound came out. Legal answered for him. It's deployed via an external node, Skyworks Modular. Legally, it's leased infrastructure. Active lease, another board member asked. Extremely active, the lawyer confirmed, sliding over the invoice dashboard printout. The running total was printed at the top in bold black font, $3,265,000, and it was climbing. Jesus Christ, someone whispered. Another board member, one of the ones who'd flown in from Boston for the demo, shook his head. You built a product on rented land and didn't pay the rent. The CTO finally found his voice. We didn't know. She didn't say she did. Legal snapped. She filed this. He slapped a printed email on the table in the first month of the rebuild. It's marked as reviewed and not applicable. You signed off. I thought it was boilerplate. It wasn't. Silence again, but different this time. Not confusion, recognition. At the far end of the table, the CEO's father, who'd said nothing the entire morning, who'd spent the last hour watching the disaster unfold with a kind of eerie stillness, picked up the manila folder. He didn't speak. He just read. Clause 5.2. Signature chain, time logs, access summary, estimated liabilities. Then he looked up, first at the CTO, then at his son, then at the CEO himself, and then very quietly the old man whispered, you let her walk into that system with a license in her pocket. The CTO opened his mouth again, but the CEO's father held up a hand. No more, he said. I've heard enough. And then it happened. Looked down at the coffee cup in his other hand, suddenly shaking just enough to slosh dark liquid over the rim. And with a slow, mechanical motion, like he wasn't fully in control anymore, he let it fall. The cup hit the carpet, splashed, rolled under the table. Nobody moved. The only sound in the room was the soft, relentless buzzing of someone's phone on the polished table surface, probably another investor texting their legal team. The old man pressed the folder closed. This demo is over, he said. No one dared disagree. The room felt like a dropped transmission, gears grinding, engine sputtering, nothing catching. Deals don't end in shouting matches like in the movies. No one flips tables or punches walls. They end in whispers, in looks exchanged between men who suddenly realize their suits aren't armor anymore. They end in the hollow quiet of money deciding to walk away. By 11:22 a.m., 3 investors had already left the room. One didn't say a word, just stood up, grabbed his briefcase, and walked out with the calm precision of a man deleting a number from his phone. Another paused at the door long enough to say, we can't move forward until IP is clean. That was the most polite version of we don't trust anything coming out of your mouth, any more anyone had ever heard. The CEO sat hunched, shoulders sagging under the weight of self-made disaster. CTO was ghost pale, eyes fixed on the folder like if he blinked, the numbers might vanish. The CEO's son, red-faced, scrolling his phone like he could Instagram his way out of a $4 million hole. The door opened again. Same lawyer, Mr. Trill. He didn't sit this time. My client, he said calmly, has no interest in litigation. However, if this matter is not resolved by noon, we will proceed to file. The documentation is complete. Access logs are irrefutable. The licensing terms are binding. He paused, letting the words sit like a brick on the chest. Payment can resolve this immediately. The CEO managed a whisper. What does she want? Trill flipped open a thin folder. Purchase of the entire Skyworks modular architecture. Transfer of ownership, licensing rights, infrastructure logs, and back-end control. Lump sum payment. No royalties, no further claims. The CTO leaned forward. How much? Trill looked him dead in the eye. 5 million, wire only. By 11:59 a.m. That's extortion, the CEO's son muttered. Trill didn't flinch, that's leverage. The room was silent. No one mentioned the alternative. Because they all knew what it was. File the lawsuit, lose the infrastructure, breach federal procurement guidelines tied to the backend's compliance pipeline, trigger a regulatory audit, get blacklisted, lose every deal waiting in the wings. The dominoes were lined up. Brenda had already flicked the first one. The CEO's father spoke again, pay her. The CEO looked like he wanted to argue, to scream, to bite something, but instead he nodded, one sharp, miserable jerk of the head. At 11:46 a.m., the wire went through. Back at the cafe, my phone pinged once. Transaction confirmed. Account updated. Funds received. I opened the Skyworks admin dashboard one last time. Server activity, normal. License, transferring, system, stable. I typed one final command. Delete admin access ID, B. Watkins time. Now I sat back in the chair and watched the cursor blink for a moment, then vanish. No fanfare, no confetti, just silence. The same silence they gave me when they thought I was disposable. The same silence I turned into a ticking bomb. And as I closed my laptop, dropped the empty coffee cup in the trash, and stood to leave, I sent one final message. Not to them, just to myself. I hope the Lambo was worth it. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit him.